gentlemen, my name is Vicki Martin and I'm the forum organizer for today's candidate forum. We're part of the League of Women Voters of the Palatine area, which includes Barrington, Inverness, Hoffman Estates, Rolling Meadows, and Schaumburg. Founded in 1920 out of the suffragette movement, giving women the right to vote, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that neither supports, endorses, or recommends candidates for office. The League's purpose is to promote responsibility through the informed and active participation of all citizens. Providing this forum allows citizens to become better informed about the issues that face the community and the candidates running for office. We're pleased to offer this service to you. I would like to introduce our moderator for today, Karen Freibar. She will explain the rules and the format of today's forum. Ms. Rybar is a past president of the League of Women Voters for Cook County and a member of the League of Women Voters for Arlington Heights, Buffalo Grove, and Mount Prospect. Just also for your information, our candidates are competing for 3 open seats on the District 15 board. So, Karen Rybar.
Welcome back to the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum. We will now hear the candidates of Community Consolidated District 15. Just as a reminder, I'm going to move this so I can see the candidates. Just as a reminder, the candidates have agreed to abide by the ground rules provided by the League of Women Voters. They are as follows. Candidates have drawn numbers to determine speaking order, and I will rotate the order during the forum. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an introduction. Then each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the questions. And we will have probably about 7 or 8 questions. At the end, each candidate will have 1 minute to do a closing statement. Candidates also have up to 2 optional rebuttals for 30 seconds each. And please, just interrupt if you would like to make a rebuttal. We'll do it right at that point. Candidates have been asked not to interrupt each other, and I will repeat a question if asked. Please remember to speak into the microphone. I think you all have one to share, because sometimes the audience can't hear if you're not right there with your microphone. League members will act as timers. They are right here in the front, and they will give you a 30 and a 15-second warning, and then a stop sign. So please quickly complete your thought when you see the stop sign. Time limits will be enforced out of respect for all candidates. Questions will be provided by the audience, and each question will be answered by all the candidates, so please make your questions appropriate for everyone. League members have index cards to write questions on, so please raise your hand if you're a league member, and just ask the league members for cards for questions. They will be picked up by the volunteers, and questions will be reviewed for clarity, appropriateness, and to avoid duplication. A lot of times we get similar questions, and we just kind of put them together to make one large question. Audience, please turn off your electronic devices. I know you think you did, but somebody didn't last time. Please also hold your applause until the end. And please do not demonstrate in any way support or non-support of a candidate. Please be respectful of all the candidates and the attendees. There is space in the lobby for candidates to speak to you after the forum, and that is also where they have some campaign literature if you would like to know more about them after this forum. Okay, for the District 15 school board race, we have 8 candidates. 6 have come today. There are 3 open seats. I will read, one candidate has said she could not come today because of a work commitment, and I will read her opening statement. Please, timers, time me, so now I'll see what it's like for you guys. Okay, I will start with her statement and get that completed, and then we will start with Ms. Hunt, and you'll do your opening statement after I read. Okay, this is Lisa Krams' opening statement, and that's all we'll hear from her the rest of today. Good afternoon, morning. Thank you all for being here today. I'm sorry I couldn't be here in person. Many thanks to the League of Women Voters for this opportunity to share a little bit about myself at this forum. My name is Lisa Krams. I'm a mom of two who grew up in Arlington Heights and moved to Palatine with my family about 5 years ago. I have a master's degree in applied health sciences and have built my career working to support and improve the health and well-being of kids and their families. For the past 7 years, I've worked at the American Academy of Pediatrics, where I support pediatricians across the country in using technology to support child health. I am running for the District 15 Board of Education because I believe that we are all responsible for creating the change we want to see in our lives and communities. We have every reason to be proud of our schools, staffs, and students. They do amazing work and achieve so much every year. I am an asset to the board because I am committed to the health, well-being, and education for all children and families in our communities. I will seek to ensure that any decisions and changes implemented by the board are supported by evidence and research. I listen, think, and do my homework before I speak. I am a collaborator who appreciates a diversity of perspectives, and I would welcome discussion with my colleagues as to how best to support the children, families, and staff in District 15. Okay, now we will hear from the candidates who are here with their opening statements. And Ms. Hunt, you will be the first.
Can everyone hear me? Sorry.
Tap it. It's the other way.
It actually says battery.
Yeah. Battery.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
My name is Wenda Hunt. I've lived in Palatine for over 18 years. My husband Wesley and I have raised 3 children here, all of which have gone through District 15 schools. Having multicultural children, I appreciate the diversity that is District 15, and I appreciate the quality of education that my children have received. You see, my parents were immigrant teachers from the Philippines, and they always stressed the importance of education as opening up opportunities for you. And that could not have been more true than for me, because at the age of 18, not only did I marry my high school sweetheart, we also were raising our first child. Statistically, we shouldn't have made it, and I shouldn't be sitting here before you right now. But because of my support systems, my family, my friends, my church, we were able to finish college. And for me, that was a first degree in nursing and then my doctor of pharmacy degree. I'm running for District 15 school board because I appreciate the grace that was extended towards me. But as leaders, I believe we should set the foundation for education. We should remove barriers like access to resources, and that we should provide a nurturing environment for our students. Then and only then can every child, regardless of race, social, economic status, or ability, can find their place in society to college and career and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor.
Good morning. Also, like to say thank you to the League of Women Voters for having us here today and giving us the opportunity to come and present ourselves and our ideas to you. As we mentioned, my name is James Taylor. I am a resident of Arlington Heights, corporate Arlington Heights, and of course live in District 15. My wife and I moved our family here to District 15 2 years ago, specifically for the schools and the programs that are housed in the schools. We have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. My oldest is a student at Lake Louise in 2nd grade. My daughter is just turned 6 years old, and she was born with special needs and complex medical issues, and so she's in an amazing special ed program at Sanborn School. And then my youngest is in the preschool program at Lake Louise. So I have a lot of investment into the future. In the District 15, we're going to be here a while, with a lot of things that will come up in our own family and within the district. And so I really want to be involved in the board for that purpose, to just really be involved and be part of the decision-making process as they come and how they impact the future of my own children. I am an occupational therapist by trade. I work currently in the school setting, so I work with both general education and special education children, and so I have that background as well. And I think that I would be a good candidate or good board member because of that unique perspective that I bring. I'm a parent of both general education and special education children, and so I see the impact it has on their lives, but I also see what it's like to be on the front lines as a teaching staff and as a related service staff member in a special education setting and gen ed setting. So I can help the board with that perspective in decision making as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Khan.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Zubair Khan. I am on the board, currently running for re-election. I live in Hoffman Estates. I have 3 children. They are all in District 15. 2 of them are at Whiteley Elementary, and one of them is at Plum Grove Junior High. They think that my job is being a board member, but I'll remind them and you that I'm an attorney by trade. I have a practice in Schaumburg and in Chicago. You know, I'm running again for re-election because there's a lot of unfinished business. I feel that in the last 4 years, we have accomplished quite a bit. We've had a complete revamping of the curriculum. We've had dual language academies that have started. We've had a total revamping of the communication that the district utilizes, and other things that I'm sure we'll get into as we move forward. But there's still lots to accomplish here. We still need to accomplish the ever-elusive full-day kindergarten situation. We need to increase the equity in this district to make sure that there isn't a burgeoning achievement gap and that there aren't 2 districts, that there's 1 district. And we need to finalize common sense boundary reformation to make it more sense for everybody here. I'm running because I feel over the last 4 years I've gained the experience to know how to get things done and how to work with different people from different, with different thoughts. I work with essentially two different boards, and I feel like I know how to work with all different types of ideologies. This district is unique in that it is a quality district with high academic standards, but with a very wide diversity in terms of socioeconomic backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds. I am looking to prove to people that that is something that we can adapt and prosper, that we can be the example to people around the state, that you can have a diverse and a prosperous district. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bosky.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Adam Bowski, and I'm running for District 15 School Board. I wanted to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this on. Always a great event, not only for District 15, but 211, and definitely the Library Board. Amazing facility here, so I appreciate this being put on. So I am running actually again. I ran 2 years ago and did not win for District 15 School Board, but I don't think that's a negative. That's actually a positive, so it makes me more passionate to try again. I will quote a very wise person. It says, "Do or do not, there is no try." That's Master Yoda, so if you know any Star Wars. So you know, that's my quote, and you know, somewhat I feel like a couple years ago, you could say I tried to run for District 15 School Board. Even though I didn't win, I wanted to make sure that I kind of went the approach of do. So I continued to be involved in the community. I actually joined the board for Hoffman Estates on their zoning to get board experience. I was an executive member for our PTA for my local school. I'm also a member of the Parents for Excellence for District 15. So I continue to be involved. So you know, I want this to this election to prove that I'm here to support the community and continue that involvement going forward. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pallett?
Thank you. Last night, as I was struggling to come up with my intro statement, someone messaged me on Facebook asking me who my favorite philosopher was, because they had noticed on my webpage that I was a philosophy major. My favorite philosopher back in the day, when I had the luxury of having favorite philosophers, was Benedict Spinoza. And here is a quote from him that I think gets to the heart of why I am running for school board. Spinoza writes, "The highest activity a human being can attain is learning or understanding, because to understand is to be free." I am running for school board because to me, education means freedom. I am a passionate believer that education levels the playing field for all of us. Regardless of what economic strata you are from or what your abilities are, education opens doors and minds. Being on the school board also means bringing more to the table than a passion for education. To be successful in this role, you have to understand the details, engage with the community, and be open to ideas which may not be your own. I can and will roll up my sleeves and put in the thought and time needed to understand the issues and make informed decisions for the benefit of our community. Finally, you should know I live in a multi-generational home with my parents and my daughter. Therefore, I am very adept at listening to different opinions and managing conflict.
Thank you, Ms. Ader.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event. Thank you to Karen for moderating, and for all of you for being here today to come learn more about us and our ideas for the district. My name is Samantha Ader, and I am running to bring the next generation of leadership to District 15, and because of my deep belief in the power of education. My grandparents came to America from Cuba because they believed in the ideals of democracy and public education, and their experience instilled those values in me. I have dedicated my career to serving in education nonprofits across the country that are making sure that all kids, regardless of circumstances, are able to access a high-quality education. I am currently the Director of Operations with an organization called Latinos for Education, and it's a national nonprofit working to support Latino leaders who are working in our education system. I live in North Hoffman Estates with my husband Dan, who's here in the back, and my daughter Claire. And we chose to live in this district because of the quality schools and rich diversity. Our community deserves a board that reflects the strength and diversity of our community. As a board member, I will leverage my network and expertise in the education sector to ensure that all of our students have the resources they need to thrive, which includes full-day kindergarten, as already mentioned, that all district staff are valued and developed, and that all of our community members are authentically engaged and empowered to lift their voice to the board and district leadership. The future is now for District 15, and I hope to work with you to shape the next chapter as your board member. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will go to questions, and we will begin with Mr. Taylor. And the topic of the first question is school ratings. And the question is, what can the board do to improve the rating of our schools, some of whose rating has dropped?
That's a great question, and actually, we were all just part of a group interview for the Daily Herald, and this was one of our kind of pre-questions in terms of the bio that we submitted. You know, one of the things that struck me when I looked at, you can go online and look at the report cards of our schools, is that 3 of our middle schools are underperforming. However, everyone else is at least average, if not exemplary. So, I mean, overall, the district is doing very, very well. But the middle school level is an area where we can cause a great deal of trouble for their future in education. So we want to look at what our administrators need, what do the staff need in those buildings that are underperforming, and really get to the heart of what do they need to do the good job that we know they are doing, and what are those struggles, what's causing them to be behind. And as a board, it's our job to make sure that they have what they need and that we give them the resources that are scientifically proven and research-based to get where they need to be.
Thank you. Mr. Khan.
I think that the new ratings that have come out, you have to understand that this was there are some schools that have started having lower ratings. It was because the standards themselves were changed. It wasn't based on other standards, but I think they're still very important to deal with. So these revised standards, what we need to do to improve those standards is to, like we've done with the curriculum, the curriculum has been revised drastically over the last 4 years, and that's going to have to be done more to make it more compatible with the Common Core standards, so we're able to perform better on these tests. Even the PARCC test itself is going to be revised as we know moving forward. So those things will change, but what we need to do is a revamping of all the different curriculum. We've already done math and science. We need to do the remaining subjects to make sure that the kids are having the necessary tools to do better on those tests.
Thank you, Mr. Bowski.
I'm going to try out the tiny microphone. So ratings, as Zubair said, the rating scales continue to change. Currently, the testing is a very long test for our children, and I think that has an impact on the testing scores, and we can already see that's changing to shorter time periods to see if that has any effect. So I think the schools will have to continue to adapt. What I've seen, which is great, is each school has their own ratings that they have to take a look at. I think the board and the administration really gives schools, those individual schools, the resources and the power to make decisions for them. So it's not based on the entire district needs to focus on this. It's this school has a specific need. Let's make it math in this school and reading this school. So that's my favorite thing about this district, and I think we need to continue that passion going forward.
Thank you. Ms. Pallett?
So I don't think ratings quite tell the whole story. When we have a diverse district, ratings are looking at the kids that are here. And oftentimes, the kids that are a little bit below, how far have they progressed? And that's really something that our schools have tried to do, which is to bring kids that are not quite at where they should be up. And the way to do that, of course, is the basics. Reading, math, and science. And we need to keep funding that, but I don't think ratings are good if you're having somebody come from outside. Do I want to live here with schools? But I also don't think ratings tell the whole story of what all of the things that District 15 has achieved. And should be progress over time that we should be looking at.
Thank you. Ms. Ader?
So I think for this question, really we can't address the ratings without addressing equity. So across the board, we see gaps in academic outcomes along lines of race, ethnicity, and income. For example, on the PARCC assessment, only 16% of our Latino student population is proficient in math, compared to 49% of white students. So there are a lot of factors that cause gaps like this. And so it's going to take a wraparound approach in order to address it from the school district as well as our broader community. What I would hope to do from the board point of view is make sure that our district is pursuing research-based practices in equity, such as hiring diverse and highly qualified staff, ensuring that we have professional development of staff, especially along with cultural competence, and that we are developing a comprehensive parent engagement strategy as a key player of our children's education.
Thank you. Ms. Hunt?
Now, school ratings, we need an objective way to measure how kids are performing academically, and school ratings are just one of those. And it is alarming for me that, of course, as James has talked about, three of our junior high schools are underperforming. So the school board needs to hold our superintendent and our schools accountable for that. As a school board member, I want to ask the tough questions. Who are these students? And as Samantha had talked about, it does impact minority students. What are the reasons for it? What has been implemented, and then reevaluate whether or not those things that the superintendent and the principal have implemented are effective. So the quality of our school systems is important to me as a school board member.
Thank you. The next question will begin with Mr. Khan, and the topic is school safety. And here's the question. What are your ideas for enhancing the safety of students, particularly relative to an active shooter? And you might speak to the issue of carrying guns and safety personnel.
This has been, I think everyone can hear me. Well, maybe I can. This is an issue that has come up significantly in the last 6 months, as you know. I think that safety requires a multi-pronged approach. One, as we started to do already, is we have enhanced the entrance ways, because a lot of our schools have that more basic but important doable process to increase safety, which is to make sure that it's a completely safe and they can't come in without some sort of intercom. But the most important way that we need to look at in terms of safety is mental health. We need to make sure that the school is in the very top in terms of hiring social workers and psychologists to make sure that we can identify when kids are at a potential point of breaking, and we need to make sure that's done. A lot of that is also monitoring and engaging with the kids about the pressures that they're feeling on social media, because a lot of these things, as they've had in the recent past, can be uncovered through social media.
Thank you, Mr. Bowski.
So ideas, one idea that I think the district's already taking action on would be increased access to the school. So I think of even my work. When I walk in, I don't have a security guard that's armed, but I do have, a pass that I have to, scan in order to get into the door. That kind of access is important for our schools to have, so it does, prevent or slow down any action that would happen. The biggest thing too is preparation. So, the drills that the students and the staff does regularly is important. Just recently, my son goes to Thomas Jefferson. They had a main water leak in the front vestibule go off, and they had to evacuate the school. The kids in the school, the staff didn't know what it was. It wasn't a drill. They saw some smoke, but they acted and they were able to evacuate to another school very quickly. Those are the actions that we want to see in the school. If they're prepared, they can prepare for any kind of situation.
Thank you, Ms. Pallett.
I did not support the proposal excuse me, to have retired police officers work in the front office. And thankfully, we're not at a point yet where we need to have police officers in our schools. I'm really grateful for that, at least our elementary schools. The district is doing a pretty good job with the fortifying our front entrances. Fortify is the key word there. And also the lockdown drills. We need to, as Zabir said, I think, look at prevention with mental health and bullying programs. And also to see what we can do to kind of make our schools a little bit safer, maybe add some fencing, higher fencing and playgrounds if possible. So it would be, and of course, continue to partner, as our school district has been, with our community and our police officers.
Thank you, Ms. Ader.
Thank you. Safety is obviously a top priority of our students, staff, and families. I support the board's current plan to retrofit the entrances to make, for those schools that don't already have them, to make the schools more secure. And I will support measures where there is research proving that it will keep all of our students and staff safe. I think it's also important that we look to the experts in this issue. So we look to law enforcement or organizations like Everytown for Gun Safety, who recently came out with a proposal to end mass shootings and gun violence in our schools. This report is co-authored by Moms Demand Action, Students Demand Action, the National Education Association, and the American Federation of Teachers. And so we must pursue efforts that we know and that there's research from those that are the experts in the field for our schools.
Thank you, Ms. Hunt.
We're having this conversation because unfortunately we've had shootings in areas that were once considered safe zones. Those are churches, those are schools, those are in our hospitals. And unfortunately, District 15 has already started implementing safe measures, such as, again, addressing the issue of just the entrances. But we really do have to have a broader conversation with our children about emergency preparedness, so that we can alleviate the stress that we convey to our own children. Parents, teachers, educators, we need to be mindful of what our children know. And active shooter drills are important. Take, for example, in the hospital, we do CPR tests every year just to ensure that when the situation does occur, that everybody is prepared. Kids need not to be afraid. They need to change that fear into courage and confidence when they're in school.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
I agree. I think this is such an important issue, and I have to say that the board and District 15 has done a lot in moving towards securing our entrances in all the buildings. I think that's a great plan that we should be doing. But I think school safety is more than just shooting, but since the question was specifically to active shooters, I think there's two pieces to that. One would be that preparedness. Just like our students are so prepared now and willing to accept a fire drill. It's an unfortunate reality, but the reality is that there is the potential for active shooters, as much as we hope that it doesn't happen. And I work in a school, so I feel this threat every day. And so we are trained every day, every year, sometimes twice a year, on what to do in that event and how to respond to those events. Secondly, like Zubair had said, and others have said, we really need to focus on increasing mental awareness in our buildings. It's a lot more than bullying. The bullying programs in District 15 are fantastic. However, I think we really need to help our staff, and not just our school psychologists and social workers, but all of our staff, be at least topically trained on how to see those red flags in students who might need some more support.
Thank you. The second question will begin with Mr. Balsky, and the topic is all-day kindergarten. What is your plan to get all-day kindergarten in all schools in District 15?
So my plan is to get more space. So that's the biggest issue right now with the full-day kindergarten piece is the capacity to provide it to the entire district. So we know that full-day kindergarten is being given to certain students that need it currently in the district, but it can't be done full district-wide because of space capacities, because some schools right now are even over capacity without full-day kindergarten. So in order to do that, I know the committee right now, the boundary committee, is taking a look at different options to be able to accommodate that piece, but we really need to put together, the board and the new superintendent, a plan in place. So right now it's one of their main goals, but really making sure that it's not just a goal, it's an action going forward. So.
Thank you. Ms. Pallett?
Sorry. As Adam said, I think the space is why we have not been able to have full-day kindergarten in our local schools, and this is why redistricting and the boundaries is such a hot issue and why we really need to move that forward. And of course, there's many ways we can do it, just redistricting, building new schools, repurposing existing schools, and my suggestion, what I would support, is that we would look to see if we could repurpose existing buildings, maybe build a new elementary school or have a new elementary school in our Rand corridor, and then perhaps if needed, a new junior high, we'll repurpose and make a K-8 building on the Hoffman corridor, and that way we free up some space across the other schools, and we have full-day free kindergarten at the local schools, which is what parents have been asking for.
Thank you. Ms. Ader?
Thank you. So I'm also a proponent of all-day kindergarten, as I believe everyone in this panel is. So the challenge is obviously just figuring out where it's going to be and how much it's going to cost. And so I think the Boundaries Task Force is going to play a critical role in our ability to actually assess what investments we might have to make and the cost-benefit analysis of the proposals that are put forth by the Boundaries Committee. So we know, research has said time and time again that for every dollar you invest in early childhood education, you receive $3 down the road. So as we think about the investment that this is for not only our kids, but also for our community and for the district's resources, we need to make sure that it continues to be a top priority.
Thank you. Ms. Hunt?
Okay, the National Education Association, as Samantha has talked about, says that all-day kindergarten increases greater reading and math achievement. So that's probably why all of us all agree that this is necessary. But the question is how we plan for it. We really have to address our capacity, thinking about partnering with the Boundaries Task Force, and then evaluating our budget. We have to put this into the budget so that we can set our actions into motion. The Illinois State Board of Education says that 79% of kindergarten classes in Illinois are all day. There has got to be a reason why we haven't gotten there, but we are long overdue.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor?
Well, as you heard, I think there's no question that this is something that we need to do, and everybody up here is aware of that, and the reasons behind it. It's the foundation for our kids' education. I mean, the longer they're in school, the more they have a chance to learn. And coming from a special ed background as well, I think it also provides more opportunity for them to get the support they need early on in life to be able to build those foundational education skills. How to do that is the question, otherwise it would be done by now. I think looking at the current use of space, and as we've talked about the boundary committee, once it's established, looking at what we have, and if our current buildings are still overcrowded and we can't house a full day kindergarten in our own home schools, then maybe we consider strategically placed full day kindergartens, and that would then move students around to those full day kindergarten locations to alleviate some crowding issues even in some of the other schools. That would open up space for those students in those buildings. And I do feel that if finding a new location is a cost that we need to endure, I think it is absolutely worth it. As we mentioned, the return on investment is huge, and it's our children's foundation.
Thank you. Mr. Khan?
Full day kindergarten issue is critical for all the reasons stated. I think very strongly we need to take bold action, meaning we need a new building. We've gone past the point where you can repurpose the existing very old buildings to increase space. That might be a Band-Aid, but what we really need is a new building, most preferably in the Northeast Corridor where there's a lot more students. That's the only way that you can have full-day kindergarten while still having community kindergarten, so we don't have people traveling long distances for their school, particularly the young ones in kindergarten. We have to do it in conjunction with the Boundary Task Force, because we can't take one action and then have the Boundary Task Force and spend money on it, and then have the Boundary Task Force come by and say, hey, well, we're going to recommend something else to solve the boundary problem. So that's why we have to work with them. They're making some great progress, and we should be hearing in the next few board meetings their report. And when we take that combined with the efforts on full-day kindergarten, that's the best way of moving forward, and we can get this done in the next 4 years.
Thank you. The next question will begin with Ms. Pallett, and the topic is finance and the budget. And the question is, how would you address the financial issues and status of the District 15 budget?
So the current budget, what I noticed was we are doing much better, and because we were, I believe, for the bonds, there was, had a $4 million shortfall, and now I looked at the latest one, and it's much, much better. So I guess our budget seems to be very strong right now. We do have money, we have money in reserves. So in terms of addressing it, I guess the only thing I would address is that we use that money wisely, make sure what we're going to be spending on, we prioritize it and are purposeful. And also, if we're going to be doing new schools, redistricting, that we have the community support and we don't make the mistakes that we have in the past, which is just passing through referendums without the community being involved or engaged.
Thank you. Ms. Ader?
Thank you. The district budget stands in a pretty strong place. It's currently, from the state, designated at the recognition level, which is the second to best. So we still do have some work to do, but we are at least coming from a strong frame. I think in order to assess the budget, we need to review the current budget for any efficiencies that we might be able to, or cost savings that we might be able to make. And then for any cuts or investments, we need to be conducting a thorough cost-benefit analysis, as well as partnering with our community to help identify those priorities of where we might be able to save funds or where we could make some additional investments that are going to have a large impact on our kids. And then the last thing is the board needs to stay informed about state policy. Illinois ranks first in reliance on property taxes to fund K-12 education, which is neither sustainable nor equitable. And so as the board, we need to stay abreast of what's happening at the state level as well.
Thank you. Ms. Hunt?
Certainly budgets are a big part of our job as board members. Currently, when I work as a pharmacist in a hospital, budgets are a huge part of my oncology budget, especially because it's 3 to 10 times that of everybody else's. I understand the need to address this. So budgets, again, fundamentally as a board, we have to choose to either live within our budget or ask our taxpayers to increase take on the burden of increasing our taxes. I think as a taxpayer, you and I probably would all agree that we need to live within a budget. We need to look at the line items in our budget and see where we can find some efficiencies. That is key. Our budget must be sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
As already been mentioned, I mean, budget is obviously one of the foremost things that we would be responsible for as a board member. And District 15 right now is in a good place. And I think what's already been said, and if you look back on things that our current board, is a very great example, has talked about the work that's been done on the budget, we are in a good place. But in order to stay there, I think the best thing that we can do, or that I could do if elected to the board, would be to make sure that we're thinking through and fully discussing budget issues that come up. And by that, I mean really making sure that we include the community as much as possible when we can. The boundary committee right now is a perfect example of that, of how successful that has been, including the community in that decision. Also, really, when we make investments in future programs or resources, that they are current, forward-moving decisions, that they're research-based and they're proven to be successful before we spend money. And then we're always mindful of the taxpayer dollar. Living within our budget, as you mentioned, is absolutely the mindset we should be having. And if something comes up that requires us to move beyond that, then that's when we really have to think about that and something like a new building, for example, and really think through before we make those decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Connors.
Well, regarding the budget, I mean, I'm happy to report that, like everyone else is saying, we're in very good shape. Our reserves are at or above the recommended reserves by the Illinois Association of School Boards. And this has been done for a variety of reasons, some of which are very beneficial contracts that we entered into with all of our union partners. And so that were difficult decisions that we took, but that we're seeing the results of it now, where everyone is sitting here saying we're in a great financial state. So we have to keep making those tough decisions when they come up. How to ensure that it continues to happen? There's common sense things that needs to be done. For instance, our maintenance. Increase the yearly maintenance that we put forth in our budget as opposed to waiting until something really drastic happens and we need to do major repairs. Things like that are effective ways to just, on the edges, to make sure that the budget still is effective and we still maintain these great reserves over the next years. And then we use them when needed to increase the well-being and the welfare of the kids. Remember, that money is there for the kids as well, so let's make the proper decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Broski.
So when I think of finance, usually my wife comes to mind because she tells me to stop spending every time our credit card bill is coming up. But the district doesn't have my wife there, but we have a great team that provides reporting regularly at board meetings. And over the last couple of years, we continue to see a very strong financial background for the district. We have reserves in place that really support us from a financial standpoint. It's just making sure we're not digging too deep into that. So we recently looked at, again, the complex on Rand Road to expand that. We did put a little funds in there to look at that idea, but that would deplete us quite a bit if that's the direction we're going to go. But if it's going to reach our goal, it might be something we take a look at. Those are the things that a board always has to weigh, the cost benefit there. Do we make that risk to finally hit our goal, or do we make sure we're staying in a financial standpoint? So it's thinking long-term and short-term all at the same time.
Thank you. The next question will begin with Ms. Gator. And the topic is school district improvement, and it's asking you for 3. So limit yourself to 3. And here it says, what would you consider the top 3 needs or priorities to improve the district?
So I think number 1 would be closing the academic gaps across lines of race, ethnicity, and income. That's something that not only benefits those students directly, but just benefits our community economically across the board as well. I would say number 2 is, I think we really need to rebuild the trust and support of our support staff in the district. Linda and I have hosted 3 listening sessions with ESPA members, and what we heard is there is a sincere lack of trust and relationship between this group and our board, and that hurts our kids ultimately. And then number 3 is we need to address the facilities issue and understand where we are implementing full-day kindergarten, the boundaries, making sure that we're creating a plan that's going to be beneficial for our community as a whole.
Thank you. Ms. Hunt, 3.
So I have to agree with Samantha. we are running together, and so our biggest priority is to really close the academic gaps. And part of doing that includes addressing the kindergarten and having all day kindergarten available for our kids, as well as addressing the boundaries issue. Again, we've talked about how some of our schools are underperforming, and we need to make sure that first and foremost, all our schools are performing to standards. And then after that, move over kids as needed, as per the recommendations of the boundary committee. We also have to remind everybody that as a board, not only are kids a priority, but our staff is a priority as well, and as Sam has already addressed. And finally, we are the community voice, so the community should be able to access or have a means for transparency with what the board is actually doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor.
This is an interesting question because you all have already asked. The questions you've asked have been our priorities, it sounds like, and I'm going to say the same thing that I've answered already, which is the achievement gap is really a big concern for me. I want to make sure that we do that, and I think we can do that by doing some of the things that were just mentioned. We really need to make sure that we increase communication and provide support and dialogue with our administrators in the buildings and the school staff in the buildings, making sure that in order to do that, we're providing them the resources and support that they feel they need, not what the board thinks that they need. Reaching out to the experts, those people are the experts are the people who are using these resources. And also full day kindergarten, which we talked about at length just previously. And lastly, increasing mental health awareness in the schools. I think it's a really key factor. It will help with bullying, it addresses school safety, and just the overall emotional well-being, social emotional learning standards that the state recommends. Those are all things that can be accomplished by just increasing mental health awareness by our staff and people in our buildings.
Thank you. Mr. Khan.
Okay, thinking about three top priorities. First, I would say we need the full day kindergarten. We're in District 15. We're an outstanding district with all the resources, but this is the one blight that we have that, hey, we don't provide full day kindergarten. It's a shame, and it needs to be taken care of ASAP. The equity gap is also a shame. I established the first ever equity committee within the board. It's never been done before. It was established on my watch in 4 years that I was there. This equity committee went out and examined the reasons for this achievement gap and came up with a couple. We are now in the process of addressing those issues, which included oral language skills and poverty-related issues. So we have to move forward with that committee. Third, the boundaries. We need to make sure that everyone has schools that they're nearby to where they can go. Common sense. We can't have people from around Thomas Jefferson, when they go to junior high, they're going all the way across the district and passing Plum Grove on the way. So we need to make sure that there's more common sense boundaries, and those are the three things I think need to be handled.
Thank you. Mr. Bosky.
So when you mentioned 3 goals, just so happens that our material outside our website really focuses on 3 things that me and Zubair are really trying to push for. So one is improve education for every student. That means multiple levels. Full day kindergarten is one of those pieces. The achievement gaps would be the improvement that we're looking for, and continue to take a look at the curriculum. Number 2 is connection with community. So we talked about the equity committee, but also just continuing with forums and communication. So I've seen a huge improvement when it comes to our app, to email and text communications to our parents, but how do we continue to reach out to those that don't have kids in the community? And then number 3 is bettering that boundary. So I think, as Zubair talked about, is there's kids from Northern Palatine and Hoffman Estates that travel a long way. How do we continue to take a look at that and improve that piece?
Thank you. Ms. Pallett?
I agree with everybody here, so a couple of things that I would just add is this. I think we have really great art and music programs, and we should continue those in the specials. That's really something we have that's unique. I would also say that what we need to do is understand and accept that we are a diverse district. And it has to be that we aren't just gifted, we aren't just ESL, we aren't just special needs. And how do we work with that under that whole umbrella? And acceptance is really, instead of just this is where we are, understand that this is a big district with a lot of different needs. And finally, I would of course say that full-day kindergarten, because not only is it going to help us with the early learning, but it will attract new families into Palatine.
Thank you. The next question will begin with Ms. Hunt, and the topic is the role of the school board. And the question is, what is your definition of what a school board's function is?
Okay, the question is, what is my definition of what a school board does?
A school board's function
Okay,
is.
so what is my definition of a school board's function? Well, as a school board member, we actually work together with the superintendent and help and keep the superintendent accountable for presiding over all of the schools. As a school board member, we are the voice of the community. I've said that before, and I'm going to keep on saying it. We represent the interests of the community, so we should be open to what the community has to say or the concerns that are brought forth. So my function as a school board is to, again, work with the district staff to ensure that kids have a quality education, but again, be the voice of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
For the sake of repeating, the voice of the community is key. One of the things I really liked was that we can live stream the board meetings now, and so being able to have more community involvement there has been great. My role would be to represent the community, but also really to strengthen the bond and be the liaison to the people that are on the front lines in our buildings, the ones that are educating our children, the administration, the staff, and the students. The board's doing a great job, but I feel like that's one area we really have to strengthen, and that's, I think, the main function of the board is to ensure high quality, high standards in our buildings, and to do that, we need to know what's happening in the buildings, and we have to be able to interact with and have a great relationship with the people who are in the buildings every day. We are not, as a board, we're not in those buildings every day. We may be able to attend certain functions and things, but to know really what's going on, we have to increase the communication with the community, increase the communication with each building, and really know what the needs are. Where are they struggling? What do they want to do that they're not able to do? And hopefully we'll be able to meet those needs for them.
Thank you, Mr. Khan.
As a board, we do not run the schools, but we are the oversight board. We are a critical piece representing the public. They come to us, we go to them and find out what are the issues that are out there. We're not the experts, we're not education experts. I know I'm not, but I go out there and I talk to the experts on the board, off the board, in the administration to understand how to alleviate the issues that the public has brought forth to us. I think that's the main role of the board. It's almost like an oversight committee, that we're here to ask the tough questions, and we have to constantly ask them. And we have to also ask the questions of the public, because it has to be a dialogue. It's not just, okay, I'm hearing this, so I'm going to do this. It's to engage in the dialogue, and I think we've done a lot with that in the communications committee that I'm a part of that has helped quite a bit. Not only do you have to communicate with the public and the administration, you have to also communicate with each other. I've worked with 2 different boards over the last 4 years, and that's one of my strengths, is that I'm able to communicate with everyone and understand that we need to work together and come up with the solutions.
Thank you. Mr. Brodsky.
So my definition for the role of a school board member, so I agree with Zubair, is to be an oversight. So our main priority is to set the standards and set goals that the superintendent and the administration then has to act upon. So that's my own definition. That's the definition you can find for school, Illinois School Board, National School Board. So as a board member for the Zoning and Planning Commission, before every board meeting, you get a big packet. Board members now, they get a large packet. You have to be educated what's going on with those issues and what's going on with communities. So you also have to be involved. So you want to know what's going on with your school, but other schools. So that way, when you get that community feedback, you're making decisions based on what the experts say, the superintendent and the administration, but also what's impacting the students and the community members. So that's my definition.
Thank you. Ms. Pallett?
So, as Zubair and Adam said, the job of the school board is to govern, not manage. And how do you govern well? You govern well by understanding the issues, but also understanding your constituents. And one of the things that I think we can always do better on, and one of the things I've seen as I've been and I'm doing my research is people in the district, whether it's busing or special needs or food service or the Palatine Opportunity Center or parents, they're so excited and so proud of the work they're doing. And I keep hearing again and again, I wish we'd see more of the school board. And of course the school board is a few people. And, but they can't be everywhere at once. But I would say is it's critical for the school board to meet all constituents, whether it is our support workers, our community members, and that is how we govern, and we govern well.
Thank you, Ms. Ader.
Thank you. So as others have said, the role of the board is really boils down to providing accountability for the district and oversight and serving as a bridge to the broader community. We're also a collective of individuals that bring unique skills and perspectives to the board. As a board member, the unique perspective that I will bring is expertise in the education sector. I have worked in education systems across the country, and I've seen the innovation that's happening. And while District 15 is strong, we have a lot of work to do to really push the district to the forefront of what's happening in education that will ultimately serve our kids. The other piece of it is around this community engagement. The definition of community engagement is a process by which leaders and formal decision-making authority seek input from stakeholders on decisions that may impact their lives or interests. We have to increase input from our community on the forefront before decisions are made, so that decisions that we're making as a board reflect our broader community.
Thank you. The next topic is redistricting. And Mr. Taylor will begin with you. And the question is, what affects the opening and closing of schools and the boundaries? What would you look for?
What affects opening and closing of schools? Wow, that's a tough one. Well, what affects the boundaries, I think, it would be most importantly the number, the population within the current boundaries and the surrounding boundaries of the school. And I know that's a huge oversimplification, but ultimately that's what it comes down to is how many students are in the building that you are speaking of, and how many students are in the building surrounding it. What does transportation look like to get to those buildings, and would there be a more evenly distributed way if we move these boundaries? At opening and closing of schools, I think that's kind of the last thing we want to consider. We would not want to consider closing the school. I don't think that's anywhere near where we are. We're in an overcrowding situation. So closing the school would not be something that would be on the forefront, I would imagine. Opening new schools is a huge cost. And I think although it would cost a lot of money to do so, if it's something that would be required, that would be a board decision that we would want to include the community on. But I think there's a lot of ground to cover before we get to the point of wanting to discuss opening a new school.
Thank you. Mr. Khan.
Regarding redistricting and opening or closing of new schools, the number one thing is to have schools near to the students. The demographics in this district have changed drastically in terms of where the population is, and the schools have not changed with it. And so we have this problem that's been there for now more than a few years, and we need to adapt to it. That means that's the main thing. Are our kids going to schools nearby? Because there is a value in that, and not wasting time, going all around the district in long travel times. The other issue that has come up is when at all possible, we want to try to keep kids together. If the kids are going from elementary school to junior high to high school, there's ways where we can make sure that they're with the same cohort all the way through high school. That's something that is valuable to students and parents alike. The third factor is obviously cost and where those resources need to be. All the demographics are not the same. There are some places. That's why that's why we need to that's why we have a boundaries task force together, because these are a lot of different factors that need to go in to figure it out.
Thank you. Mr. Bowski.
So as far as redistricting, the Boundary Task Force sent out a survey, and we got thousands of residents in the community that responded to that survey. I think the number one priority they wanted to take a look at and wanted the reboundary to focus in on is making sure that, I would say the feeder schools, especially working with 211, that the junior highs feed into those high schools. So it helps from an education standpoint, it helps from a student piece. That's really the goal of the Boundary Task Force. They purchased some great tools in order to help that redistricting and make sure that based on populations of students where that would be the least amount of effect. So I think we're going to see some great proposals from that group. Kind of answer the second part is what affects opening and closing. I mean, there's two pieces. One is if you don't have any students, there's not really a piece to have a school. That would affect probably a closing. If you have no students, it would close. Opening schools would be you need more, you have overcapacity. So I think the boundary committee is taking a look at that piece. So it's not that affecting opening and closing, but just moving students around to meet that goal.
Thank you, Ms. Ballard.
Could you just repeat the question?
What affects the opening and closing of schools and the boundaries?
So I think the boundaries, one thing is just a couple of things to put on rest, because a couple of parents have asked me, Friend is not changing, your high schools are not changing, and your kids are not going to go to Arlington Heights or Barrington schools because of the boundaries. The boundaries are what our overall boundaries, and it's just moving the kids around. And the one thing we need to understand is we do not have overall, our schools have capacity. They're actually under capacity in some schools and over capacity in others, which is why we want to redistribute. And mainly why? Because the priority of our district that people have said is full day kindergarten. If we do nothing, we're still fine. It's just that we are going to have some schools that are overcrowded and others that are not as crowded, kids going to school very long distances, and we're not going to have full day kindergarten. But that's right now, because of those priorities in our district, that's why we want to do redistricting.
Thank you, Ms. Ader.
Thank you. So any decision that we make around this needs to be research-based and student-centered, what's best for our kids. So I think there's also a balance of the neighborhood schools model as well as thinking about integration of our neighborhoods. Research shows that integration boosts academic scores and social and emotional well-being for all kids, every kid. And so that's another factor that we need to take into consideration when assessing our boundaries and potential school closures and openings. And then also we obviously have to take into account our cost of what those decisions would be, as well as our space and facilities.
Thank you, Ms. Hunt.
Now, the Boundaries Task Force is really created to address the capacity concerns. It was mostly for Plum Grove, Pleasant Hill, Willow Bend, and Hunting Ridge. Those are where capacity was really, really needed to be addressed. When the Boundaries Task Force finalizes their top 3 goals, their top 3 plans, we need to keep in mind that we need to limit the disruption to our kids, our staff. When we move kids around, we need to be cost effective. We need to make sure that we are not blowing a budget just because we need to move kids around. Because don't forget, our communities are dynamic. But we also have to address the fact of diversity and inclusion. And I'm just going to leave you with words from Pope Francis, who said, the only future that we should worth building is one that actually includes everybody.
Thank you. The next topic is standardized testing, and we'll start with Mr. Khan. And the question is, what is your opinion about the amount of class time focused on standardized testing?
I think that it has to be reduced. I've talked to teachers. This is a pretty consistent complaint. Now, you have to look at it in a number of ways. We need a way to evaluate how students are doing and how teachers are doing. It's just a necessary part of education. And so the question comes, okay, how much time are we spending on standardized testing? I think the PARCC testing was too long. I think it has been reduced and it will continue to be reduced. I think that I think overall the answer to the question is yes, it needs to be reduced. Now, at what end? We need to make sure that if you're going to reduce those times, that you still have effective methods to evaluate how our children are doing. We can't just go by some subjective evaluations alone, although that is also a major component of evaluation. There needs to be objective and subjective ways to evaluate how our children are doing. That unfortunately includes these standardized tests. We need to reduce the times, particularly for the PARCC test.
Thank you, Mr. Bowski.
So I would agree that time spent on standardized tests needs to be reduced. Overall, it does give us data in order to help us provide support to those students that might need it. So you can allocate resources in different areas. So it's an essential need for our school. But I think as we continue to see learning can be done in many different ways. I don't remember the last time I took a test at work. So really, my learning is done in different settings, and that's where I want to make sure we're spending enough time in those areas and not focused all our attention on that standardized testing.
Thank you. Ms. Pallett.
So standardized testing is, as people have said, a benchmark. It should not be the only benchmark, and we should certainly not be teaching to the test, which I think we've reduced it quite a bit, and I'm excited to see what the new park test, the IAR, has. But also, for sometimes I think, for example, the map, that how we do that for our gifted kids, we have the 95 percentile cutoff. Fine, great. Those kids get into gifted, but then there is this, kids who may be smart and we don't really know what to do with them. Or we have kids on the other end of the spectrum. So testing is not the full picture. I support testing as a benchmark, but not the only benchmark that we should be doing in our district.
Thank you. Ms. Ader.
Whatever.
I got it.
So I agree that I think our kids are spending too much time on tests. But I think that there's, again, so much innovation that's happening across the country in this particular topic. And there's different tools from a teacher's toolbox in order to really assess where kids are at. So I believe that more of our assessment should actually be built into the learning process. And that we can use different tools such as, there's something called the stealth assessment method, which sounds kind of intense, but is really just being able to assess students without them actually knowing they're being assessed. And then a portfolio method, there's another method called sampling. And so when we think about these methods, we're able to assess growth over the year and not just have a snapshot at once per year. I also think, though, that this touches on teacher evaluations too, and that our teacher evaluations should be holistic and should encompass three main categories: classroom environment, instructional strategies, as well as student assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hunt.
So we need a means to measure academic progress, and that must be objective. Student success is not just academics. I can actually look at my own children and see that. But let's look to the success of schools across the country. I agree with Samantha in that there are so many other things that schools are doing in order to reach children. Let's get to the heart of what successful schools are doing, and let's model after that. Let's be open to the ways in which we can reach our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor.
So I agree, as seems to be a trend today. But standardized testing, I agree. I think it needs to be minimized. It's only one piece of a way to measure a student's success. There are certain tests that are required by the state, of course, but I think we need to minimize how much we use those standardized tests for. So we need to find other methods. Ms. Ader was just saying there are many other ways that we can go about assessing a student's growth. And as long as we're focused on that growth mindset, I think we'd be okay. I think we would actually capture a lot more. A standardized test does not capture so many other things that a student is growing and being successful with. I was a horrible test taker, horrible, but I think I'm a pretty successful human being. I have a master's degree in occupational therapy, a successful career, and I probably bombed almost every single standardized test I ever took. So I think it's not the only measure. It's something we have to do because the state says so. And I think we can leave it at that. But I think that there are many other ways that we can look into the growth mindset and really capture the great things our students are growing with.
Okay, this will be the last question, and we'll start with Mr. Bowski. The topic is communicating with the community. And the question is, what is one thing you would do as a board member to effectively communicate and engage with the community?
So one thing that I would do individually is making sure that, as we're all somewhat campaigning here, we continue to make forums and do environments that we can meet out with the community, is to continue that even after the election would be, on April 2nd. So continue to make yourself, of course with board, you can't do it as a board because from an Open Meeting Act, but you can still do it as an individual. So that's something that, wearing a name tag, making sure when you're going events, you're vocal, going, hey, I want to represent you. What's your opinion of your school? So another piece, that I would do is, I know President Shupai does this quite a bit, is she's going to many of the community events, not just her own child's school, but events throughout the district, and that's one thing that I will continue to do if I'm elected to the board.
Thank you, Ms. Mallett.
As I said, I do think this is something that we can work on as a board, and I would suggest two things. One is that I think all of the board members should rotate through once a month on different areas of our district, whether they're going to the schools, for the administrators, meeting different groups, meeting with ESPA, meeting with parents, and also a practical suggestion would be maybe on the Tuesdays before we have our board meetings, we use our wonderful library as an open house, and as Adam said, we can't all be there, but some board members are there for an informal setting so that they can have discussions rather than at the school board meeting where there isn't a lot of time to engage with school board members.
Thank you, Ms. Ader.
Thank you. So the number one thing that I would do is push the board to develop an intentional and comprehensive community engagement strategy. So this process includes 3 stages. First, there's planning. So you need to set priorities for the engagement and develop the strategies that you'll use to actually conduct the engagement. Second, there's implementation, which is when you are actually consulting with the community. So you're attending or putting on community forums, creating a community advisory board, one-on-one meetings, etc. And then the third phase, which I think is one of the most important, is the evaluation of how that engagement is playing into your decisions, as well as the impact that those decisions are having, and reporting that impact back to the community. And as we keep going through these cycles, we are going to build more trust and partnership with our community instead of this board on the castle on the hill, but will actually be your friend, your neighbor, and someone that you can trust to communicate and advocate for our kids.
Thank you. Ms. Hunt.
I think most of us can think of our work life and look to see like what is our bosses doing, what is our companies doing to improve communication. That's brings here that also is applicable. Sam had talked about earlier that we had held multiple listening sessions before this point with both the staff of District 15 as well as parents. Those roundtables, those listening sessions were critical because we needed to hear what was important to all of you that are sitting out here right now. So what would I do to ensure that we have effective communication? I would keep that as a top priority as a board member. Most people are plugged in. If you go walking around here, everybody has a phone, everybody has access, or everyone tends to have access to what's out there. Let's think of all different ways in which to address information sharing, and not just on the internet, whether that's also mailing and so on. But we need to ensure that we're constantly in touch with people.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor.
I think if I had to choose just one way, globally, it would just be to continue to make myself available and encourage the board to do the same. Forums like this has been one of the primary ways for me to get out the word of what I believe in and what I want to do on the board. And I think something like this, continuing things like this within, of course, the Open Meetings Act. I know there are guidelines and restrictions to how many board members can be together at any particular event. But really having those roundtable opportunities, maybe we rotate through the certain board members that can go to a roundtable where community can come in and kind of talk about their concerns and bring it to the board, just for like listening sessions, like you said. But really just finding ways to really get out there, attend things in our schools, attend community events, and just be around for the public and our community and our staff to be able to voice their concerns and their questions and things to us so that the board continues to stay in touch and has a finger on the pulse of our school district to know what's going on, what are the concerns, what's happening, and not just when we get that packet before the board meeting, but we're knowledgeable beforehand.
Thank you. Mr. Khan.
I would say about communication with the community. It is a difficult issue, and what you do see, I mean, there's many community opportunities for communities to be involved in different committees or be involved in different settings. But what you see is like a lot of community-related activities, you have a small group of people that tend to go to all the items. So the question is, how do we get those that are more passive? They still care very much about the schools, but they're more passive in their engagement. How do you get them involved? I think for those type of things, you have to look more to a social media type of communication. Right now we have, in the communications committee that I was a part of, we had much more success on the District 15 app, the text messaging, and the streaming, as was said, of the board meeting. So those are actions that are more effective in getting the more passive participant in the district to still feel connected and still give their voice, but they're not going to be coming and being part of a larger committee. So that would be my one thing.
Thank you. We will now hear closing statements from each candidate. We will begin with Ms. Pallett.
First of all, I would really like to thank the League of Women Voters, or as I like to call them, my homegirls. I love this organization, and I hope you will consider joining them. And we have a lot of big issues ahead of us in District 15. We have a new superintendent, we have redistricting, and I don't believe our community has healed from the support workers' strike. This is an exciting and challenging time to be on the school board, and I hope you'll give me the opportunity to serve you and be your voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ader.
Thank you again to the League of Women Voters for hosting this and for all of you for being here and for the great questions today as well. I'm excited for the future of District 15 and the opportunity to work with Dr. Hines as our new superintendent. I'm a mother, I'm a homeowner, and I'm an education professional. I've spent my career working to see a day when all children, regardless of circumstances, have access to a high-quality education. As a board member, I will bring the same passion, knowledge, and network to our board. I ask for your support and your vote on April 2nd or during early voting, which starts on March 18th. And we have materials out on the table, and I'll be sticking around as well, so feel free to come up with any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hunt.
Thank you again, League of Women Voters, for hosting. Thank you, all of you, for coming out to just listen to us. District 15 deserves a board that's willing to work for the best interests of its students, all the staff, as well as the community. I believe the board, again, is the voice of the community. Now is the time for the community to come into the board, and then for the board to get out there into the community. Thank you.
Mr. Taylor.
Thank you again for today. I think the one thing I want to leave with about myself would be that there, in any school district, any school board, there will always be concerns, there will always be issues, there will always be challenges. That's what our job is. Our job is. But I feel like I would want you to give me your vote, because I think that I would represent the community very well because of my background and my kind of just regular everyday guy kind of attitude that I have. I work in this setting every day. I'm in the education setting every day, general education and special education. I come home to that with my children as well. So that never ends for me in a very positive way. And I feel like the unique perspective that I can bring can be very valuable to the board, both in general education and special education. And I think that that's something that is missing right now in being able to represent all children. As much as we're working towards equity, I think that we're on a great start. And my perspective would be really detrimental to the growth in that area.
Thank you. Mr. Khan.
Thank you again for this opportunity. I'm running for re-election. I'm running with Adam this year, and one of the main things, I really do have a fondness for this community. I'm from here. In fact, I went to Marion Jordan as a kid. I went to Sunling in junior high. My wife is from here. I met my wife at Friend. And now my kids go here, so it all comes full circle. And I believe this is a very special district for the reasons I've stated before. It's high quality, but with a diverse background. And it's not one of these, lily white suburbs. It's not one of these suburbs that doesn't care about everybody. It's a great, diverse district, yet it's excellent in its academics. What an example that we can provide for the entire state. I'm also somebody that believes in not letting perfect be the enemy of good. I've said that before. I've been on this board. I understand that you need to get things done. You have to work with different constituencies, and I have done that already, and I will continue to do that. So I think that for all those reasons, I hope you give us a chance. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Bosky.
Thank you again to the League of Women Voters and Karen for moderating today. So especially the day after National Women's Day, so fantastic to come out here and have your attention and hear about all the candidates that are running for District 15. I think it's passionate that 8 people are running for 3 seats. It always makes it difficult having that choice. My passion 2 years ago was full-day kindergarten. Of course, I had a little bit of personal aspect. I have a son now in 2nd grade. My daughter's in kindergarten. So my 2 children will not benefit if we push that through, but I really don't want other residents to not have that in the future. So, it's a testament to me that I still want that, even though I have no personal agenda behind it. So, me and Zubair are running together, and we have a lot of the same priorities. So, I will say my slogan: vote A to Z, Adam to Zubair, on the April 2nd election. So, thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our forum for candidates for Community Consolidated School District 15. We appreciate the efforts of all these fine candidates, and let's give a round of applause to the candidates. And we want to thank our student helpers, and please remember to vote April 2nd or before, but not both.